Welcome to Ouch. Was that a ghost? This podcast may contain graphic material, which some listeners may find disturbing. Listener discretion is advised.
Help me.
Now that we covered that, here's your host, Liz.
Welcome back to Ouch, Was That a Ghost? Before I start, I just want to welcome our newest Patreons, Tabitha and Lauren. I hope you're both enjoying the benefits, and we're so happy to have you in the inner circle. And the season is approaching. The pumpkin spice grossness is rearing its ugly head. As we're entering spooky season, I've decided to cover a witchy story. Being from Massachusetts, I immediately, in my head, go to the infamous witch trials of Salem, which were not the first of their kind. Salem became infamous from February 1692 to May of 1693, when roughly 200 townspeople were accused of and tried for being witches. 27 people and one dog died due to this madness. 19 women were convicted and sentenced to hang. One woman's husband was pressed to death by stones, and 7 more women died in jail, and we can't forget the poor dog that was killed. To this day, those people are honored on a daily basis within Salem. However, I want to make mention of history that took place over 20 years before Salem and the witch trials there. I covered Salem, I want to say around last Halloween, if you want to go back and hear a deep dive into that madness. Before the Massachusetts witch hunt, Torsåker, Sweden, was home to a large bit of history that really should be mentioned before one thinks of Salem. Not only is this period of time, from 1674 to 1675, known as the largest witch trial in Sweden, it's also the largest mass killing of alleged witches. This period of time is known as one of their darkest in history. In one day, 71 witches had been killed. Most of these were women. These alleged witches were beheaded and burned all in one day. This is due in large part to a minister by the name of Laurentius Christophori Horneus. He hailed from, I wish you could see how scary this word looks, Yicherlanius? I'm probably butchering that. He was ordered to investigate the claims and accusations being made in his parish. The method in which the minister did the investigation is still quite baffling, but it was accepted as truth then. Similar to how Salem accepted the word of 2 young girls. Minister Horneus ordered 2 young boys to stand at the doors of the building, and as the congregation and townspeople entered, they were instructed to identify the witches by pointing out the ones who were marked with an invisible mark on their forehead. This invisible mark was known as the devil's mark. The people who had the devil's mark were secluded and then forced into admitting their collusion with the devil. These forced confessions, mostly from children, came about through whippings, threatening to make them bathe in frozen lakes, or the threat of putting children in the oven and baking them. So what exactly were these poor people accused of? They were suspected of kidnapping the town's children and bringing them to Satan's Sabbath. Satan's Sabbath was reportedly a festival celebration by Wiccans and also neo-pagans. The festival's held in a meadow known as the Blockula. In Swedish folklore, the Blockula is explained as, and verbally passed down, throughout generations as the place where the devil held court. As the people walked through the church entrance, the boys would have reactions and point out the people who carried the devil's mark. Oddly, it was only seen through the eyes of these 2 young boys. One part of the folklore that makes the witches of Sweden so memorable is the fact that the minister did not exactly follow his own orders he was given. All those that were identified as having the devil's mark were put through the tortures of threats, whipping, fear, and ultimately death. except for one person. Who was this person? Why were they given special treatment? Of the 71 people accused of having the devil's invisible mark on their forehead, one was the wife of Minister Horneus. This accusation, not taken with the proverbial grain of salt as all the others were. The minister's wife was not secluded or taken or put with the other accused people. This accusation was quietly covered up. Basically, this accused witch was allowed to walk away because it was the minister's wife. What makes the Torsåker, Sweden witch trials so different from the Salem witch trials is that the commission and the local courts all carried these trials out without informing the higher court of the accusations and the subsequent deaths of the accused that followed. So how do we have any record of the Sweden witch trials? Well, here's the kicker. All the information that was recorded was by the grandson of the minister's wife, 60 years after the fact. The information is based on her eyewitness account of the situation. Obviously, the trials were based on shaky facts and information. The legitimacy of the trials were indeed flawed. And based on what was shown in Salem, the reporting parties, the two boys, had no way of proving the devil's mark ever existed. With the exception of the minister's wife, the statements given by the boys were taken as truth. However, the Sweden witch trials have had a long-lasting effect in Sweden. To this day, around the Easter holidays, you'll see children dressed up as witches. They wear shaggy clothing, dark makeup, and all carry a broom. Similar to what is done at Halloween in the United States, the children will go door to door and collect candy from each household. This tradition generally takes place on what Christians call Maundy Thursday or Holy Thursday. During this time, most households in Sweden will hide their household brooms, and you'll find that bonfires are lit to keep the witches away. Even hundreds of years later, it's believed that witches gather at the Blockula to convert and dance with others and the devil. Torsåker is not the only Swedish witch trial. There's another just as well known, the case of Kirsten Larsdotter. For Kirsten Larsdotter, her time of preparing her family and household for a long winter was interrupted when the heavy knocking came at her door. Kirsten quickly learned that a total of 54 children, as well as others, presumably adults, had accused Kirsten of taking them to Blockula, the festival with the devil. One young male informed the court during the 4-day trial that he had been forced by Kirsten to eat food, including a live snake. He stated that after, he could still feel the snake squirming and slithering in his stomach. He believed that the only way to rid himself of the snake was to confess to the parish priest. According to his parents and 2 other adults, once he had made the confession to the priest, the snake crawled right out of his mouth. False tales continued to come from the mouths of the children, ranging from conversing with the devil who spoke through Kirsten, being forced to turn their backs to the altar and curse the Holy Communion. Kirsten apparently even had snakes slithering and writhing around her neck, while the black angels forced the children to do their bidding. The most important question to ask in regards to the Sweden witch trials would be the same as any other location that was having witch trials. Why were certain women and men being accused of being witches if it was not true? Many believe that it's due to instances where the accused or a member of their family owed money to the family of the accuser. Some also believe that the adult who had been accused may have disciplined the child in some form or embarrassed the child that later accused them. Sweden has a long history of supposed witch trials. Many of these have been documented by younger members of a family who witnessed or had heard the stories as they grew up. Contrary to the way that the law works today, historically, the courts believed that children were perfect witnesses. They were too young to lie or create fabrications, such as the wild stories being reported. It's also reported that priests were known to pay some of these children for stories reported as accusations. The Great Noise was a period of time where the witch trials and accusations were at their peak in Sweden. They began to culminate with the Torsåker Sweden witch hunt. It was basically an 8-year witch hunt with trials and executions from coast to coast. It lasted until 1676, when authorities proved that a witness falsified their statement. After this, all the priests were ordered to tell their congregations that they got all the witches. There was no more left in Sweden. But do not be mistaken. This is not to say that all witch trials ended or that all witches have ceased to exist. Witch hunt trials have continued throughout history. They're just not as famous or well known as the Torsåker Sweden witch trials or the Salem, Massachusetts witch trials. These cases that led up to the Sweden witch trials will forever be a part of history. And they may continue to change in facts and beliefs as time moves on, due in large part to the lack of documentation. We do know that the accusers, children and adults, and their false accusations caused many people, men and women, to lose their lives. So the big takeaway being from this, whether you believe in a practice or a religion, and it's not harming anyone, who cares? Let people believe and be what they want to be. Groups don't need to be persecuted or vilified just because you don't understand them. Well, thank you everyone for listening. And just FYI, there's some new merch up on CrowdMade under Ouch Was That a Ghost. A few people requested hats. I've put a few up. I'm going to put a few more up, different designs. But go check them out. And if you haven't, head on over to Patreon. There's all different tiers, different benefits. And if you're not ready for a commitment, there's a free tier. I think it was last week I put out the Green Children of Woolpit, which if you want to check that out, that's on the free tier. I love that story so much. Well, thank you everybody for listening. Bye.
Thank you for listening. If you need more content or just want to help support the podcast, head on over to patreon.com and search Ouch, Was That a Ghost? If you need some snazzy merch, you can find it at crowdmade.com by searching Ouch, Was That a Ghost? If you have a story you'd like to share, you can email it to ouchwasthataghost@yahoo.com. You can also find us on Facebook and all the other social media platforms under Ouch, Was That a Ghost?
Help me.
All links can also be found on ouchwasthataghost.com.